Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the afternoon session, day 2 of the SALTISE conference. The last open discussion keynote before we close with some workshops and our panel on augmentation in the age of AI. We'd like to open the session by inviting our Director General, Monsieur Richard Fillon, to come and give a few comments and to announce Dawson's plan for AI at the college level.
There was a lot of excitement in this room just before Joël opened the panel, so let's get excited once again. I will make an announcement on behalf of Dawson College. So good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. It shouldn't be a surprise to say that today's students will be graduating into a world that is in a state of profound transformation due to artificial intelligence and related digital technologies. According to a report released in September 2018, the World Economic Forum is projecting that by 2025, less than half of work will be done by humans. Our current and future students are the ones who will be facing these challenges and opportunities when they enter universities or the workforce. At Dawson, we are committed to offering new, updated, and upgraded classes and learning opportunities to help prepare our students adequately. As a sign of that commitment to its students, Dawson College has decided to make the largest investment in an artificial intelligence project by a cégep in Quebec. Today, I am proud to announce that the college is implementing a 3-year comprehensive plan for the academic years 2019 to 2022. $1,050,000 have been budgeted toward the implementation of a vision for Dawson College becoming a center of excellence with respect to the integration of AI in college education. Thank you. With the extraordinary support and participation of major actors in the AI ecosystem, such as the Observatory International sur les impacts sociétaux de l'intelligence artificielle et du numérique, and a mobilized and dedicated faculty and staff, Dawson is poised to revolutionize college education to better prepare the students of tomorrow, the leaders of tomorrow. Le Collège Dawson a bien saisi les enjeux et défis identifiés par le gouvernement du Québec en mai 2018 à l'occasion du lancement de la stratégie pour l'essor de l'écosystème en intelligence artificielle. Assurer le développement de talents, favoriser la recherche fondamentale et appliquée dans les domaines associés à l'intelligence artificielle et valoriser les données massives. Le plan triennal que nous avons développé au collège s'inscrit résolument dans cette approche. Dawson's approach begins with the needs of its students. We know that these changes will impact all of our students, not just those specializing in computer science. That is why we opted for a comprehensive approach to AI, including the ethics of AI, which will reach as many students as possible across the board. The college's investment will cover peer-to-peer mentorship for faculty, community of practices dedicated to AI, the creation and development of teaching materials related to AI available to all teachers, research funding for AI and machine learning, ethics of AI, and digital humanities, program development, professional development, knowledge sharing and networking, and the purchase of software licenses and consulting services. The general education core classes, which all CEGEP students in both pre-university and career programs must take, are a wonderful opportunity to integrate AI into the education of all students. Our society will need engineers and scientists who are well educated in ethics. And we will need leaders and artists who have a good understanding of technology. We will need well-rounded people who excel in collaboration, creativity, communication, and critical thinking. Instilling a culture of lifelong learning will be key. The first fellows, faculty member, who are partially released from their teaching load in order to engage in AI-related research and integration, will be participating in the Dawson AI community of practice when they return from summer holidays. This group will lead the college through this transformation and will help both faculty and staff grow and learn. They will foster connection with partners in the AI ecosystem, in the community and across the college, and they will promote a culture of data literacy. New and returning students at Dawson this coming fall semester will have the opportunity to explore topics related to AI during the week-long Humanities and Public Life Conference September September 16 to 20. The first 2 days will be devoted to the latest developments in AI and machine learning, how they will influence knowledge acquisition in various fields, and the ethical questions arising from the latest research about the impact of AI on society. This 3-year plan is the work of the Dawson AI Task Force, Samir Batnagar from the Physics Department, Ray Bourgeois from the Management Team, Jaya Nilakantan from the Computer Science Department, Carl Saucier Bouffard from Humanities, Jonathan Sumner from Physics, Joël Trudeau also from Physics. I am very grateful for their initiative, their commitment, and their enthusiasm. Now, I'm proud to announce the member of the new Dawson AI Advisory Board who will be helping guide the college through this project. Nathalie Beaulieu, Chief Learner Officer, Direction de l'Enseignement et de l'Académie CHUM. Sabine Bergler, Professeur, Department of Computer Science, Concordia University. René Breyel, founder of Internet of Things, AI of Things Canada. Michael Camus, co-founder and Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technological Officer of My Intelligence Machines. Rob Cassidy, Director, Center for Teaching and Learning at Concordia University. Aaron Courville, Assistant Professeur, Department of Computer Science and Operation Research, Université de Montréal, Canada, CIFR AI Chair, MILA. Julian Crow, Leader, Artificial Intelligence, National Bank. Mike Deutsch, the Director, Education Development, Kids Code Jeunesse. Abhishek Gupta, Founder, Montreal AI Ethics Institute. Vince Iannotti, Director, AI and Core Technology, Product Management, Nuance Communication. Jason Lewis, Professor, Computation Arts, Design and Computation Arts, University Research Chair in Computational Media and the Indigenous Future Imaginary, Concordia University. Philip Mitsopoulos, Head of Partnership, Strategy AI. Brian Moore, Training Coordinator, Ivado. Tim Pereira, Founder, Concordia AI. Doina Precup, Associate Professor and Co-Director, Reasoning and Learning Lab, School of Computer Science of McGill, Research Team Lead. DeepMind, member of MILA, Canada CIFAR AI Chair. Régent Roy, Vice Director, Observatoire international sur les impacts sociétaux de l'intelligence artificielle et du numérique. So it's quite an interesting bunch of people. You will agree with that. There's more. Aubert Sigouin-Lebel, Project Lead, Research and Content, Techno-Compétences, Sydney Swaine-Simon, Founding Member, District 3 of Concordia University, Tamara Venders-Lewis, VP Innovation, R2I.ca, and by the way, Régent Roy from the Observatory is among us today, and I would like to invite him to say a few words now and to share some of the context of this project we are undertaking. Monsieur Roy, si vous voulez nous joindre.
Alors, bonjour à tous. Je suis Régent Roy, directeur adjoint de l'Observatoire international sur les impacts sociétaux de l'intelligence artificielle et du numérique. On m'avait dit que j'avais 7 minutes. Juste en nommant le nom, il m'en reste 6. Je suis heureux d'être ici avec vous pour vous parler un petit peu de l'Observatoire puis du lien qui unit l'Observatoire au Cégep Dawson. L'Observatoire est né de la volonté du gouvernement du Québec de positionner le Québec comme un endroit où on ne fait pas seulement de l'intelligence artificielle de haute qualité, mais également comme un endroit où on fait de l'intelligence artificielle puis on utilise l'intelligence artificielle de façon responsable. Puis l'Observatoire est aussi né de la compréhension qu'avait le gouvernement du Québec du fait que l'intelligence artificielle, le numérique, de manière plus large, bien, ça va vraiment changer le monde, ça va changer l'ensemble des secteurs d'activité de nos sociétés. L'Observatoire est né en décembre dernier. Il compte 9 partenaires universitaires. L'Université Laval dirige la destinée de l'Observatoire pendant ces 5 premières années. L'Observatoire a 9 partenaires collégiaux, dont le collégial Cégep, dont Dawson. L'Observatoire, c'est aussi 110 partenaires, 90 qui viennent du Québec, une vingtaine qui viennent de l'international, comme l'OCDE, comme l'UNESCO. Mais c'est surtout 160 chercheurs, à peu près 130 chercheurs qui viennent du secteur universitaire, puis une trentaine de chercheurs qui viennent du niveau collégial. Sur les 160 chercheurs, il y en a à peu près la moitié qui viennent du secteur des sciences humaines et sociales. 25 à peu près viennent du secteur technique. Là, ce sont des gens qui connaissent l'intelligence artificielle, qui en développent, comme Mme Precup. Puis c'est aussi 25 de chercheurs qui sont en santé. L'Observatoire, the Observatory has 4 functions. It's going to do research. For example, it's going to ask questions like, what is going to be the impact of AI on manufacturing jobs in the future? It's going to do scanning activities. That is, it's going to try to see what Germans are doing to train manufacturing workers so that they'll be productive in the future. The Observatory is going to animate the public debate. Really, it's going to take the Montreal Declaration, which you probably know, which is a set of principles that can help us use and produce AI in a responsible manner. So it's going to take the Montreal Declaration and try to turn it into standards, into more concrete principles that could be applied in different sectors, like the insurance sector. What does the Montreal Declaration mean really in the insurance sector? And then it's going to make public recommendations, or it's going to be involved in public policy. It's going to make recommendations to the government of Quebec, to the Canadian government, and also we can imagine to some international bodies like the OECD and other international entities. The observatory is going to work on 8 different themes. For example, health is one theme. The future of work, the future of business models is another theme. Culture, the arts. We're going to look at how this sector is going to be transformed by the implementation of AI and digital technology. We're going to take a look at how justice is going to be transformed by AI. We'll take a look at how ethics should be taken into account when we produce or use AI, etc. So 8 different sectors. Encore une fois, l'intelligence artificielle, c'est une technologie généraliste. Hein? On va la retrouver dans l'ensemble des secteurs. Puis comme je le disais, ça va affecter autant les arts que le monde du travail, et ainsi de suite. Alors, l'Observatoire va réfléchir à la manière dont l'intelligence artificielle va transformer les secteurs. Et il est intéressant de voir que Dawson sera à l'avant-scène pour prendre les connaissances qui sont produites par l'Observatoire. Dawson pourra participer à des projets de recherche spécifiques dans lesquels on va produire des nouvelles connaissances sur la production et l'utilisation de l'intelligence artificielle. Puis l'enjeu, évidemment, un enjeu qui ne peut être relevé que par des entités comme Dawson, là, qui ont un rôle d'acteur de transfert. Mais l'enjeu, évidemment, ça va être de prendre ces connaissances-là, puis les transmettre aux partenaires de Dawson. Alors, dans certains cas, ça peut être des entreprises, ça peut être des organisations, mais au premier chef, ce sera certainement les étudiants de demain. Donc, une entité comme Dawson, en se positionnant comme elle l'a fait au sein de l'Observatoire, en prenant le virage stratégique qu'elle a décidé de prendre, bien, se positionne très, très bien pour être parmi les meneurs dans la formation du citoyen de demain, dans la formation du travailleur de demain, de l'artiste de demain, et ainsi de suite. Alors, c'est pour ça qu'à l'Observatoire, on est évidemment très, très content de compter sur la participation étroite du Collège Dawson, qui est certainement, depuis les débuts de l'Observatoire, l'un de ses membres les plus dynamiques et enthousiastes. À chaque réunion qu'on a, on a presque trop de membres du Collège Dawson. On manque de chaises et on espère que ça continuera comme ça. Alors, je félicite le Collège Dawson pour le virage qu'il est en train de prendre, pour l'annonce qui est faite aujourd'hui. Et encore une fois, on sera très heureux à l'Observatoire de travailler avec Dawson pour permettre à la société québécoise, à la société canadienne, à l'ensemble des sociétés de la planète de produire puis d'utiliser l'intelligence artificielle d'une manière qui nous permette d'en maximiser les impacts positifs et évidemment d'en minimiser les impacts négatifs. Merci.
So that's part of a comprehensive plan. Now we'd like to have a comprehensive discussion around, at least to start a discussion around the impacts of AI and other emerging technologies. So maybe we could just invite the panelists to all come up to the stage. So and I will begin reading out bios just so we can spend more time. I mean, we could spend all day reading bios actually, but. Well, let's try and keep that part short and sweet so we can get into the meat of the conversation around the theme of the conference, learning analytics, augmentation, and AI. Okay, so Doina Precup splits her time between McGill, where she co-directs the Reasoning and Learning Lab in the School of Computer Science, and DeepMind Montreal, where she has led the research team since its formation in October 2017. Her research interests are in the areas of reinforcement learning, deep learning, time series analysis, and diverse applications of machine learning in healthcare, automated control, and other fields. She became a senior member of the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence in 2015, Canada Research Chair in Machine Learning in 2016, Senior Fellow of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research in 2017, and received a Canada CFAR Chair in 2018, AIC Chair. Dr. Precup is also involved in activities supporting the organization of MILA and the wider Montreal and Quebec AI ecosystem. And we can continue. Sydney Swaine-Simon is a Montreal native with an innate drive to grow the local innovation ecosystem. In 2012, Sydney became one of the co-founders of District 3, one of Quebec's largest innovation centers. Having gotten a taste for innovation and technology, Sydney went on to co-found Neurotech X, a nonprofit organization which has built the largest network of neurotechnology enthusiasts. For fun, Sydney is a core member of the DEF CON Biohacking Village, as well as a mentor for the Mozilla Open Leadership Program. So we've heard bios already of Olivier and David, and we could go continue to discuss all of the accomplishments of these panelists, but we'll turn it over to Jim Slotta, and I'll just do a final introduction. So for those of you who have been involved with SALTISE, you'll recognize Jim, who has been a member for many years and helping to build and animate and contribute in research in this community. He's an associate professor with the Department for Curriculum, Teaching and Learning in the Center for Science, Mathematics and Technology Education at the University of Toronto. He is a World Technology Award winner in the category of education. 2006 was named a Canada Research Chair in Education and Technology. He writes extensively about the interplay between technology, pedagogy, and community, lectures internationally, and will help to moderate this panel today. So I'll turn it over to you, Jim.
I'll just start by saying thank you all for coming to this conference. I've been so impressed with SALTISE over the years for the support that SALTISE has gotten from Dawson College, from the local university community here. To me, this represents one of the most important cutting-edge communities of educators and thinkers about learning and teaching and physical spaces that I know of, and it plays a critical role not only in my career, my students' progression, but also many of your careers as well. And so we should congratulate ourselves for another wonderful year of meeting and progress and learning together. So I'm personally, to start off, we're going to maybe just have a little bit of open reflection for a couple minutes each of us, and we've heard already some wonderful keynotes and presentations from the panel up here, but I'll start by saying I'm generally interested in augmentation of both the physical and the digital world. My research is in learning communities and how our students can come to recognize each other as the purpose of the learning, so recognize ourselves as a community here in this room as a critical learning community. And in my teaching, I have my students work together and they rely on each other as the most important learning resource. We've seen in the newer eras of the internet that knowledge creation and user-contributed content has turned out to be the kind of critical purpose and identity of these technologies. We used to think that it was about serving content through the web. We now understand that it's about creating, collecting, and connecting content and people through the web. So obviously that's a huge moment of potential for artificial intelligence and machine learning in all sectors of society. I'm interested in how that can be applied to learning communities. So how can we help K-12 students benefit from these kind of interactions? Back to augmentation, we treat the room often as an inert kind of container for our learning. How can we imagine the room and the things in the room as becoming more consequential for learning? So how can the room know who's here and who they're working with and where they are in the room, and maybe the furniture can actually become more intelligent and more interactive. Maybe some physical objects in the Internet of Things can actually deliver on its promise for learning if we do the right kind of research. So this is my background, my perspective, and I'm really interested in hearing more from the panelists today. I'll have questions for them after we finish our opening remarks. Olivier.
Hello.
Hello.
So at Ubisoft, we've been working with the AI for quite a long time. So AI, globally, artificial intelligence, all the characters you see in games are what we called already AI. So for sure, we are refining along the years those little characters, the AI that we put in games. More recently, AI has been helping to remove some of the tasks that are not so interesting for the development teams, such as looking for bugs and debugging the game. And so AI is currently helping us to find patterns and to better find issues and solve them, so we have an even better product in the end. And globally, myself, I'm more into XR, so augmented reality and virtual realities. I believe AI is very interesting. There's lots of research to be done with AI, but to, for example, recreate characters that virtual entities that we could talk with, we could communicate with. We could imagine maybe, why not, one day recreating Einstein or Marie Curie or famous historical characters, and why not, based on research, based on many things we could do, have some conversation with those historical characters. We could, in a way, maybe at some point in the future, take our minds and translate them into the network, and then be eternal, being able to communicate and be there for the eternity. So I think there's lots of things to come for AI. We are where we are today, but it's exciting, in my opinion, to envision the future.
Yes, absolutely. My name is David Usher, and I think I talked to you guys a lot of you this morning, because I recognize a lot of faces. Yes. So my journey here came through essentially from the music business to the internet to digital to really an interest in interactive climate change, how we can bring technology and arts to the question of climate and reimagine those ideas, bringing things like the climate clock to life. And then now, my interest in AI is really around, these two things are really hyper objects, right? If you look at what climate change is and what artificial intelligence is, they're both these large scale objects that are very far away, hard to get a grasp of, hard to think of personally. And for myself, wanting to throw myself into the conversation of AI, I thought that the best way to do that was to really build an AI company that integrated all sorts of interactive and artificial intelligence technologies. So we really work with all kinds of different AI techs and weaving the APIs together to build intelligent characters. And if you want to see the first one, it's at the Phi Center right now for the next 5 months, hopefully just getting smarter and smarter. But our platform is really about, so we can build anything on the back end, any kind of conversation, any kind of character, and any kind of visualization on the front end. So we can build any kind of creature or being that can have an interesting, intelligent conversation with you.
Hi, everyone. So, as mentioned, my name is Sydney. I guess the one sentence that explains what drives me is I have a passion for people and technology, and it's kind of a reflection of everything that I do within my day-to-day life. I have no social life, and I think it's just because I have such a passion for the projects that I'm involved with. But you know, from my work within District 3, where I'm the AI fellow, it's not a technical role, and I wish LinkedIn recruiters would stop reaching out to me thinking I was technical in nature. But my passion is really how can we use technology to drive change for good in the world. So my work has been primarily with one organization in the US called the X Prize Foundation. Their drive there is to use technology to drive benefits for humanity. So we help to get involved in that domain of the way that we got involved in the domain of artificial intelligence was through the AI X Prize. And so we promoted the competition here in Montreal, and this competition had a focus around using AI for good and being able to solve sustainable development goals that the United Nations had laid out that we should be trying to aim to solve by 2030. So we recruited 12 teams here in Montreal to compete, and I guess we did a good enough job, so they invited us to get more involved with their organization in a wide variety of other ways. So we're more involved with the AI for Good Summit in Geneva as well too, which is one of the largest conferences around the theme of AI for Good. And more recently, we got involved with a newer mandate called the AI Commons, which was founded by a few people. One, Amir, who's one of the general managers at the X Prize. Another one is obviously a well-known individual, Yosha Benjo, here in the city of Montreal. Stuart Russell as well, and a few others. And that mandate essentially has the goal of bringing AI practitioners with subject matter experts together to be able to create for good solutions. So we're creating what's called a Living Labs here in Montreal to support that, and we're doing this with a few partners, the Chantier d'économie sociale, the TIES, and Mila as well is partially involved.
Hi everyone, I'm Doina Precup. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and it's really exciting to see this wonderful initiative at Dawson. I'm a professor at McGill University for the last almost 20 years. And the last couple of years, I decided to split my time now with industry as well. I have always done research in AI. It's kind of interesting to see how everybody's now paying attention to my research, which did not used to be the case, honestly, even 4 years ago, perhaps. But that is very exciting. I work in a field called reinforcement learning, which really means agents that learn by interaction with an environment. And so if this room was a reinforcement learning agent, the chairs might be poking you around and trying to see if you are happy or not and learn from that feedback. I also am very interested in applications of AI to the medical domain, to education, to all kinds of causes that will help society. Excuse me. And one of the things that one of the things that I really enjoy actually in AI specifically is that it has developed at the intersection of different fields of study. So I'm a computer scientist by background, but actually I spend nowadays most of my time doing math. And a lot of the ideas that we try to build into our algorithms are inspired by biology and psychology and sometimes economics theory. So it's really a research field that is very interdisciplinary, that involves people from many different kinds of backgrounds, And I think as it grows, it will become, in fact, more and more interdisciplinary because the data comes from all of these domains. The data is very rich, and we need domain experts to be involved in the development of the algorithms themselves. So I really look forward to the journey.
Well, that was a really helpful, quick overview of people's interests, backgrounds, perspectives on all of this. The way this is intended and hoped to work, I have been working with Joel, the chair, for the past few days to kind of think about some of the questions that we thought would be great to ask the panelists. Some of you already answered your questions in your opening remarks, so you're going to make me look bad. But we'll try to spin them forward a little bit more. And actually, Doina, I would like to start with you. It's relating to AI and not the hype of AI, but the sort of recognized promise that everybody can see, that everywhere you look and every time I'm in a conversation with anybody, there's a promise of machine learning. Oh, we'll just throw a little machine learning at that and we'll be able to, we can easily see, the kind of techniques that we know about and the applications of those techniques. We know those are out there. So it's more than hype. But now, can you help us think a little bit more about education and particularly this conference theme of active learning? So here in this room and around wider, the satellite rooms, we have a lot of people who are designing new ways of interacting within the classroom, teaching and learning in different domains, and thinking about helping those students progress. Where do you see the kind of interesting, not low-hanging fruit, but early promising applications of these technologies for that community?
Yeah, so it's actually a really interesting question to me. Because a little known fact is that my very, very first research paper that I wrote back when I was still in Romania was on intelligent tutoring systems and trying to design, at the time, very, very primitive intelligent tutoring systems. So I think there's always been this idea that if you had a good AI system that can interact with a student, that the AI could gather data from that interaction and then perhaps adapt both the content as well as the way of delivering that content to the particular student. And there is a research community that's been very active, that's been developing these kinds of technologies. My own feeling is that while there has been progress, it's been slow. And it's partly because a lot of the AI techniques that we use these days are very data hungry. And so they excel in domains where we already have loads of data that's available. And this is not the case in education. In education, you really have to interact with a small number of students. And so the data is very rich, but just less. And so that poses an interesting challenge, actually, from a sort of technical perspective. How do we make the AI methods better? How do we make the AI methods be able to learn much faster from less data, from fewer interactions, and sort of hit the ground running? A lot of the time now, when you start with an AI system, there's this period where it doesn't really do reasonable things. And so it takes a while until it can be good at interacting with somebody. So I think we have, as a research community, an interesting challenge that comes from this. On the other hand, I feel also that the knowledge of how to incorporate these new technologies in the classroom is very important. And this, in all honesty, is not something that necessarily AI researchers have, even if they teach in university. So we need the practitioners to tell us what they want to do, what they think are the important problems. Is it tracking student progress? Is it facilitating working groups? What are the interesting problems? And really, you need both sides talking to each other rather than saying, oh, we'll pick up an AI off-the-shelf solution and we'll plunk it into a classroom. It almost never works that way in almost no application. You need to have an interaction, and you need to have people developing something together.
Okay. Sydney, we are your social life. I'm going to just ask, after each question, I'll just ask people what they think, if they can add something, but it occurs to me you probably have something to add to this.
Maybe, hopefully. So I guess I'll have to control my emotions because I get really I swear a lot when I get passionate, and adoption of technology in education is something that's been a frustrating experience. Maybe not in a first-hand context, but with some of the startups that we've worked with, a lot of them are interested in using edtech or developing edtech solutions and trying to deploy them within schools. And it's one of those environments that, at least according to them, very, very complicated to actually get involved with. There can be specific nuances to the school associated with it, and actually getting the adoption. The tools themselves maybe need to go through a few rounds of iteration, and that could be a process that not every school is going to be on board to get involved with. So just to reiterate what already was said, it is something that there has to be an ongoing relationship between teachers, between students, between these people that are building these tools to make sure that they're adopted properly. And I just hope that we can find a way to create a mechanism to really help drive that, because Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, from his side, AI should primarily be used in artificial intelligence and education. And so there's a real need for it because of that capability to create, robust learning systems that can tailor your education experience to that individual, which is so hard to get in a large-scale system. So I really hope that it will be adopted sooner than later.
Anyone else?
As I was saying this morning, I've had a fair bit of experience working with different universities and schools, and the main barrier has been administration. It's just working through the admin and getting through the endless paperwork that drains the life out of any startup. And that's the main thing, is that there is a strategy and a structure for delivery, and that taking down some of the barriers so it doesn't make your life miserable as an entrepreneur.
Regarding AI and education, I think what can allow AI is to adapt what we try to teach, to learn to the person, to the user. I think we have to adapt what we say, the way we teach, the way we educate, the way we communicate information to the various humans that we are. And AI could allow, through machine learning, through analyzing the way the user responds, what is he doing, to adapt and make sure that the information is well communicated, is interesting to the user. We can catch the way the user reacts to that, and maybe reformulate the information in another way. So I think there's again lots of things to discover, but there's lots of promise, in my opinion, for AI in education linked with XR to make globally education even more efficient, even more interesting to everyone, to every student, to everyone in the world.
Okay, I think there's probably even more in their heads about how this vision could work that I could draw out if I was serious about it, because we have here a bunch of people who transform teaching and learning through active learning, through flipping classrooms, through lecturing, covering lecture at home, and then you come into class and you have engaged forms of learning and much more immediate and humanistic interactions. And clearly these new media and these new augmentations of the physical and virtual spaces could have profound implication for that kind of, well, let's call it practitioner research, and learning sciences research that we are doing. So I'm just wondering if anyone's got even more vision or more imagination of what that could look like in an active learning context.
One thing I would say is that AI is moving from research to sort of programmatic. So it doesn't always have to be we need tons of data. Sometimes you're just using AI, but it's AI programs that already exist, and implementing those existing programs into whatever you're doing. It can be in some sort of narrow way. Lots of interesting AI programs and functionalities exist, and integrating those into what you're doing already. It doesn't have to be built from scratch or built from a research base or anything like that. You can just be using AI, but using it in a very narrow way in something that you're already building and working with.
Okay, so I'll see if I can keep pulling, because my service is to them, and so is ours. But I want to turn to Olivier. You're a very a brilliant thinker about these augmented experiences. We had a keynote yesterday, excuse me. And so maybe more than anyone, you have a sense of what that means for a person to be engaged in these virtualized experiences and these augmented experiences, XR, as you've described. I mean, I really appreciated your vision yesterday. So delivering on that promise, I think it sounds to me as much as anything like a frontier that we are starting to see. And it was really great to have that theme present at this conference. How can you talk a little bit more, and you have spoken about this, but a little bit more about, what is it going to take to deliver on that promise for educators, again, for this group of people, both in the virtual online learning spaces and in the physical classrooms? What do we need to think about? What do we need to do?
Well,
or what do you need to do for us?
But for sure, the technology still needs to improve. Currently, it's bulky, it's pricey, it's not easy to manipulate. There's complications for the VR or AR headsets. So for sure, the technology needs to evolve. Also, needs to be pushed more as a social tool. I really believe it's a way for people to better communicate, to better work together, wherever they are in the world. Actually, they could co-work in the same virtual space. They could be, for example, projected into another planet, or see the micro world, the atoms and DNA, or see the macro world, and being able to discuss about that. AI, I think, is related to that. What I was trying to say just earlier is in video games, for example, we are creating dynamic systems to adapt to the players, because all the players are not the same. They don't have the same skills. They don't have the same capabilities in games, and so we are trying to analyze within the game how the players react, to adapt the game to be fun, to be at the right level of difficulty for them. And so I believe AI could allow to do the same thing, and machine learning, and to adapt what we are trying to express to what we are trying to teach, to showcase. If it's an experience where you are discovering another planet, or you are discovering another part of the world, maybe we could, through those devices, talking about more like of a standalone experience. Let's say there's someone that wants to explore another part of the planet, and he could have a virtual teacher, and depending on, is he interested, is he looking at a particular object, how does he behave, maybe the system could adapt to him. And machine learning in that is could analyze all the users that exist, and try to find patterns, and try to find good reactions to that. The ultimate goal is that learning, education becomes even more interesting for anyone, because it's adapted to anyone. When it's a social experience, I think XR, so whether it's AR, VR, for me it's going to be the same technology anyway. It's a great tool to have a professor, to have anyone bringing students, bringing anyone into another location, and being able to show directly something, to showcase how is it on the moon, how is it on Mars, how it's going to be the base on the moon in the future. And if you see that, I believe it can create some emotion. So emotion, for me, it's not the objective. Emotion is a way for people to better learn, better remember, maybe create an emotional connection with the crowd we are with when we are getting those education classes. And XR, in a way, and will, I believe, allow to get more interest to everyone that wants to continue to learn.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a bit of an analog to the emergence of simulations in education. You may not have direct experience with this, but there was this moment when we got virtual frog dissections. And before that, we were actually dissecting real frogs, which is brutal and archaic and destroys frogs. And also not very educational and not very engaging, right? But with a virtual frog dissection, you can strip away all the systems except circulatory. You can zoom in and go into the blood flow. You can animate the frog so it's alive while you're dissecting it. You can rotate the frog. You can rewind if you made a mistake. You can strip away layers. You can socially engage with the dissection. And so I'm imagining some of the things you're saying. And so for educators, the virtual frog dissection became a lot more impactful and a way to really engage student ideas than, you know, having them make sure they got the scalpel underneath the epidermal layer and stripping and pinning and all that stuff, which is probably important for med students. But for K-12, the trauma of cutting open a creature and sometimes even having to euthanize it. But now I'm imagining some of the worlds that you're in, and like, for example, a biology classroom where you're able, through augmented and virtual reality, to walk over to this corner of the room, put on the glasses, and actually dive in, like Michelle and Martha's talk yesterday, to the genetic world and manipulate these genetic materials and actually do experiments even, virtualized, and then potentially, like you mentioned, social. Maybe there's a little Pokemon creature that runs around the room in 5th grade and reminds you of something. Like, these are all augmentations that we can envision. Anybody else down the panel have thoughts about the promise and what are the next steps for this kind of transitioning and revolution?
So I think it's really, there is great promise, especially if you are to carry out experiments which are currently not possible in the classroom for cost reasons or safety reasons or lack of equipment or whatever else. So I think, you know, the genetics is an interesting example. You know, there may be some physics experiments, you know, nuclear physics, like blasting atoms against each other, which you could do with simulations, which you obviously wouldn't be able to do in a classroom. So that aspect of it, I think, is really cool and interesting. There is one thing that we need to be careful of, which is what kind of content, and do students still understand the reality? So taking the example of the frog, right? If you are to do it in VR, the frog can still be alive. But if you do it in real life, it's not. And so, you know, students need to understand that not everything that is possible in VR is actually real. And, you know, it'll be an interesting thing to watch for, right? As these systems become more available and they become deployed in schools, you know, how do you keep the fact that, you know, the digital world can be very, very different from our real world. The other thing that sometimes worries me a little bit is the content and the adaptation of the content based on what you think students should see and what an AI might think students should see, right? There's sometimes discussion of bias, right? Biases in the data. If we end up with systems that, for example, don't show all the content because they think a student is maybe a little bit behind, but really the student could deal with it, right? That's a little bit of a problem. Now, I don't think the AI is going to be necessarily worse than actual teachers, which also sometimes have this kind of bias, right? But it's just something, you know, if we're thinking of building AI, we want better tools than what we have now. So something to watch for.
Okay, and we will come back to ethics and issues in another question as well. That's great. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much agree with everything's being said here. I mean, I guess maybe the only other thing I can add to the conversation is, as Doina mentioned, making sure that you can separate a simulated environment versus a real environment. The major issue that I can see arise is because of the, I guess for a lack of a better term, the saliency of a VR environment. To give an example, I was at a party I do socialize sometimes. Well, it was at a hackerspace, so it wasn't really. But I was at a Christmas party a little while ago, and there were kids trying out VR headsets over there. And it was probably the strongest dopamine rush these kids have ever had in their whole life, just because it's such an immersive environment. And if you've never done it before, I'd at least suggest doing it once. But if it's something where it's stronger, the stronger sense of reality is in the actual virtual world versus the actual real world. My concern is that people are going to have a little bit of a difficulty in disconnecting themselves from it. There are many benefits from VR, especially, there's conversations around social isolation around VR, where in certain cases people see it as an increased level of social isolation among, the younger generation that are heavy active users of it. But from the other side of it, there are people now, because of VR, that are actually able to engage with others in a more physical environment, and because they have some form of maybe, for example, rare skin disorder or whatever, and it doesn't allow them to actually go outside, they actually are now able to have a physical manifestation, regardless if it's in a virtual world. It still gives them that sense of being around other people. So I think that there has to be a lot more conversations around this.
Sorry. Actually, VR can sometimes bring more ways to be social. Like as an example, I've been playing lots of video games, obviously. And before now, online, you just see characters on a screen and you are playing with the controller, and maybe you have the voice of the other player, and that's it. And now I'm playing social games and experiences in VR, and I'm able to see actually a representation of the other person, to have eye contact with him. He can take something, show it to me, show the direction where we should go. So it becomes a much more social experience now, thanks to those technologies. So I think it's up to us to do what to us and the world to do things to make those technologies more social, whether it's XR or whether it's AI. But I believe we can use them to be even more connected, even more social.
Yeah, I mean, there are things to be gained, and there are certain circumstances where you can only do things in VR. But going back to the frog, there is something in the rough edge of a real frog, the connection to the life of the real frog that you may or may not get from VR. There's something about the actual cutting into skin that is a physical act. Yeah. There's a physicality to things that you can't, or that are difficult to represent. There's an emotional connection that maybe is created between yourself and what you're doing, the people around you, and the frog itself. There are many different aspects to the experience of what we do in the real world versus what we do in the virtual world, and they can exist in the virtual world in different ways, but they're different. They're different, and there are things that are lost and things that are gained.
Yeah, this frog thing, I get a lot of mileage out of this example.
I like this frog.
I totally agree with what you say, and I'm a fan of the physical world. And I don't know, maybe we could make a very realistic, actual virtual frog that you had to, cut in. Let me actually continue with you, David. So, knowledge creation. The world seems to me to have become more accessible to the universal creation of knowledge. You look at publishing yourself in YouTube. I look at my 12-year-old daughter, and she will download an app like Acapella and make a 4-part harmony of herself singing with herself, and then upload it to Instagram, and then get votes, and then she'll scan, a drawing and augment it with coloration and upload it and create these kind of communities of exchange. I'm imagining all of the Ansel Adamses out there with these iPhone 10s who get immediate feedback on their photographic experimentation when you think what it used to take to do that kind of thing. So we have a world full of geniuses that are working with these media, and artistic creation is at probably an all-time high at some level. I'm really interested in your thoughts as an artist and as somebody involved in this. Where is this? This is a democratization of media and of knowledge in a way that I don't think we've ever seen historically. What are the implications here for education, and in particular with these new augmented and intelligent media?
Yeah, I mean, we have the tools at our disposal to make anything now. We can really go out and we can make anything and we can put it out there. The question for me always becomes about noise. When everyone has the ability to make anything instantly, put it out there, how does anybody find anything or get any traction for anything?
Google.
No, but Google, well, yes and no, because the long tail curve that used to look like this, now it just looks like that, really, because of what the algorithm does. And if you look at what AI content creation is going to do, I really believe that AI content creation in music and in photography and in art generally is going to change everything. You know, as we have AIs that can write almost as well as people can make music almost as well as people can, not quite maybe, but almost, and are able to make so much work so fast, endlessly, forever. How do we ever sort through anything? Now, my hope is that as we, you know, I often talk about AI being the auto-tune of everything, right? It takes all the round edges off, or the rough edges off, smooths everything out, and puts it out at this level. I work with Google Brain on some projects, and one of them is building artificial intelligence agents that can write and collaborate with humans on song lyrics. And what I discovered from that process is, at least where we are right now, is you know, you can teach the AI on a data set of English, on a data set of poetry, on a data set of song lyrics, and at the end of it, you get a lot of lyrics that are, "Hey baby, I love you." And that's fantastic. And I'm not saying we won't get there, but the question is really, how do we get elevation, right? How do we get elevated lyrics? How do we get lyrics that live outside of those smooth edges? And I think that's what's gonna take a long time. But the question is gonna become, as AI is able to flood the market with just tons and tons of material, we're gonna lose all that scarcity, the last bits of scarcity that we had. And in that flood of material, it's gonna be very hard for anyone to discover anything at enough of a mass that it allows anyone to be a professional artist anymore.
That does shed a little bit of light on your comment about the frog too, that there's a kind of poignance and a visceral.
Well, my hope is that the rough edges are going to become something that we value.
Yeah.
Right? The human addition or augmentation of these things, because I'm a big user of all these tools, right? I'm a first adopter in everything. I love this stuff. I love tech. But at the same time, it's going to be, you know, the inconsistencies, the rough edges, the things that make it human that hopefully we will start to value.
Yeah. So just to echo that a little bit, I'll tell you a little anecdote about my daughter, youngest daughter, who loves to draw. And then at some point, she discovered my iPad, and so she started using the program that, you know, where you can just select all the objects and color them just so, and shade, and, you know, do amazing graphs and all these things. And so she was really, really into that for about 3 months. And then she kind of went back to, you know, drawing with crayons and markers and painting and all that. And so I asked her, you know, how come you're not doing things with the iPad anymore? Not that I mind. I'm actually very happy to have my iPad back. But she said, well, it's too perfect.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting remark. But it's true. And she will, if she has to make something quickly, she will still do it. But if she has to make a birthday card for her best friend, she will draw it with crayons and markers. And I think they all kind of still value that little bit of a rough edge. And so, you know, even like with text, you know, if somebody needs to translate something quickly from English to French, they'll go to the Google Translate and they'll get something really reasonable nowadays.
Yeah.
But if they want to write a poem and translate it, they'll do that by hand.
I think there is research for AI to be unperfect, like Google that has shown you know, I don't remember the name of the communication tool where they had someone calling and the AI, the voice was like imperfect and making hesitations and stuff like that.
Duplex, yeah.
Duplex. So, and regarding how are we going to find the content that we, among the giant mass of content that there is, in my opinion, it's like Google is doing today, we analyzing what we are looking at, what we like, and adapting the content to what we would like to see. And sometimes proposing something new. But I suppose AI is also going to be deeply involved even more and more to really try to find things for us.
Well, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to, I think one thing that we're going to see, and I think this has been historically done by humans, you know, if you look back, there's going to be a cultural pushback with the adoption of a lot of these tools. You know, I think at one example is I had a friend who was a guitarist that I knew back in Cégep, and I told him that I liked techno music, and he was like, "You mean that thing where you just go on stage, you push the play button, and that's pretty much the whole show?" It's like, yeah, I guess so. And I think that kind of ties into, for certain people, they have that emotional experience towards the individual, not necessarily, it's that connection between the artist and the art itself that some people really appreciate, not necessarily the art. You can have the perfect drawing done by an AI solution, but there isn't going to be that real emotional connection or that human connection that's what will be missing.
Right, and then Marshmallow Head holds a conference on Instagram, a concert on Instagram, and 4 million people attend or something like crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a wonderful, or I hope it's still there, place in Essen, Germany called the Unperfect House that's an artist community, and it's sort of dedicated to this notion of the rough edges. And my conversations with someone there a few years ago now were that they felt that the artist was going to become an increasingly valued member of society as we moved into these, highly noisy spaces, that those who could actually create and they could actually produce that creative content would become, starving artist would be a thing of the past, and that we would see an increased value on those true
The
creative
question
moments.
becomes, we work with multiple layers of AI tech that already exists, and we just stitch it together. As we move down the path, you have to visualize a world where there's continually going to be new programmatic stuff where we can integrate. And is there just a rough button that you can turn up? Those are the kind of things that are definitely going to exist, not very far from now. And for me, it's really about sheer mass. When OpenAI decided not to release that algorithm, that's fantastic. But that algorithm is going to get out there. Like, somebody's going to make it, someone's going to release it, and we're going to have mass amounts of fake news about every subject released endlessly. And it's how we're going to sort. That's when it gets complicated, I think, where we're going to have to see how we deal with those kind of things.
Interesting. And we're going to come back to the dystopian future here toward the end, but I want to go back to classrooms now, and Sydney, to ask you about big data, about learning analytics. We had a keynote to open the conference. I'm not sure if you were able to attend that one, from Alyssa Wise, who's here, and she talked, I thought, really well about this new frontier of how educators are able to use the data from their students, both historical and like amalgamated, but also even real time, and AI and machine learning can come into that. But even as a way of just getting a finger on the pulse, of helping personalize, of helping, democratize in a way. Any thoughts on, specifically for this community of educators, the promise of these technologies for instruction, for teaching and learning?
There's the promise, and then there's, what we also have to be aware of as to the negative repercussions of them. Obviously on using large-scale analytics to be able to assess, how well you're doing, and actually taking, education pedagogies in a more quantitative fashion is always something that I think everyone tries to go towards. We're going in every domain of society and industry. Everyone's going towards quantification and really be able to assess and metricize how well you're doing. To give an example, a little bit outside of education, in the realm of psychiatry, this is one area that is being heavily disrupted right now with the use of artificial intelligence. Because, for example, when it came to a psychiatrist, providing a certain prescription for a drug, it may take many years to actually find the appropriate dosage and the right drug to get there. And it comes down to the intuition of the psychiatrist to determine what is the appropriate dosage. But now, as tools become as there are better tools to actually quantify, the types of drugs, the amount you should be taking, and so on and so forth, you'll be able to get much better insight and actually do a much better job of engaging with your students, or being able to get a good understanding of how well you're doing. I think we also have to be very cautious, though, about these tools and making sure that it's capturing the right type of data. And to kind of give an example that's a little bit more personal to me, if we don't, for example, quantify for example, there's a few individuals within a classroom that are not doing very well, and we try different methodologies and it doesn't seem to be working. But what we completely forget is that maybe the individual's having either a learning disorder, or maybe they have some other form of mental illness that's bugging them, for example, with depression. It was something where for myself, I went through a period of 10 years in my life where I had depression in my teenagehood. And it's once I figured it out and figured out how to deal with the symptoms of it, that I was actually able to become a more productive member of society. And I was able to actually learn and be more productive. But if we don't actually have a system that's robust enough to identify what the potential cause of certain issues are, then we may be just going down the wrong path.
So one of the ways I think about analytics is it gives you a really big tool, right? Like a powerful microscope in some way, right? You can look at it from different angles, you can understand what is going on, but it does not necessarily tell you how to improve things. So that's one aspect where I think pedagogy still is really very much needed. It's really nice to have this tool. The other sort of thing that is to be avoided sometimes, despite the fact that I'm a machine learning person, I do this all the time, is optimization, right? So if you have, let's say, sports analytics, sometimes people will say, oh, there's a certain percentage of, successful strikes that this person has. Let's try to optimize that somehow. And you can get bogged down into one number. And I think really the beauty of analytics is give you a very wide picture of many different aspects of what's going on. And some of it might be quantitative, and some of it, in fact, might be qualitative, right? You might try to gauge, let's say, the mood of the classroom or the level of engagement, and that may not be such a quantitative thing. It may be composed of various pieces. And so it is, to me, a tool that has to augment the teacher. And it's really, the teacher is the central piece. And this is just an extra tool you have to kind of understand what is going on. And ultimately, also, the decision rests with the teacher of what is the best approach, right? How to engage everybody, and why certain people are lagging behind. So I think it goes back to this word, which is augmentation. And how do you augment the teacher's capacity to drive things in the direction that they think is best?
I just want to finish with a question about citizens, about preparing citizens. That is fundamentally our job in this room, both in K-12 and in higher ed. We are preparing these young people to take into the world. And Richard Fillon just announced this kind of commitment to helping think about preparing these citizens for a future. And we hear so much gloom and doom about the loss of jobs. Two areas for me in particular are commonly, noted and on everybody's mind, including my 12-year-old daughter. The economy and this gig economy, and that no one's going to have a job anymore, and you've heard all this, and the climate. That I empathize greatly with your concern there. We all could go into the details, but we're going to try to, and these young people are starting to see through us a bit that we don't actually have a good plan for them. We're here to do our jobs. Like I sometimes talk about 17th century physicians. We have to do no harm and get them out the door with a degree. But can I just, as a final question to everyone, what is it that we can take away positively, optimistically, the promise of these augmentations and these artificial and machine intelligence to imagine preparing these new generation of young people, and what are some of the things that we should take with us going forward?
Reminds me of an advertisement we have at Ubisoft currently, Ubisoft Education, saying that 80% of the jobs in 10, 20 years are not invented yet, have yet to be discovered. So, like many technologies, people fear at first, okay, we are going to lose our jobs, TV is going to disappear, this is going to disappear. Actually, new technologies always bring new jobs, new people that have to work to refine that, to develop that. And I don't believe AI is going to take the job of everybody. Actually, we will still need people to create the computers, to feed the AI with something, to imagine what we could do with AI. I believe creativity will still remain very human. AI can help us, can probably create songs and movies and stuff like that, but maybe there's some part of imaginary that will always come up from humans, and that the AI will never go there at some point. But I don't believe AI is going to replace or take the jobs of everybody. It's just more, and we will have to discover that actually. Before the internet, no one could imagine that there would be internet, there would be mobile phones, and all the technologies that we have today. And so I think we don't know yet all the technologies that are to come and all the uses of the technology, and it's still going to take humans to create the world and to direct the world in a way.
I mean, I think that AI is going to remake the economy completely. I think it's going to be implemented slowly in all kinds of things, and it's going to really change how we do a lot of things. And I think that there are going to be winners and losers. The jobs aren't going to disappear, but jobs are going to be different. I think a good example is thinking about the Green Revolution. When the Green Revolution hit, it wasn't the coal miners that were retrained to build solar panels. Those jobs were created, but they were created by someone else for someone else. And there's going to be a big shift, and there's going to be disruption as certain markets lose out and certain markets gain. And I think as educators, the job is to try and train people to be open to the future and to embrace the future. While at the same time, we were talking about it before, is that the other thing that teachers can do is take a theater class. And you're a performer, and you need to engage your students and open their brains.
That's great.
So they can be excited about what they're studying in their future.
That's really great.
I guess what I can add is I think that with the rise of AI that are very specialized in doing specific things, and if there's the opportunity of using these tools to augment human capabilities, it's going to create a bigger rise of a concept that they use at the MIT Media Lab called antidisciplinary, where it's essentially, instead of the idea of having multiple stakeholders in the room, you have a single individual that is capable of working across multiple different fields. So you may have an individual that's good at computer science, psychology, maybe, I don't know, neuroscience or whatever. And if you have these tools that can essentially help to, number one, teach you quicker these subject materials because they're, it's speeding up your capability to learn, and it's helping to augment your decisions, you can essentially make these things, bring these tools together to create new innovation. And most innovation that actually happens in the world is not within a specific discipline, it's when you usually combine disciplines together. And I think like the level of innovation, it's like most of it, like 67 or 70% of all innovation comes from that angle. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there to create more anti-disciplinary individuals. Beyond that, I think that there's going to be a much bigger rise in entrepreneurship as people are striving to find new opportunities, new commercialization opportunities as well. So I think entrepreneurship is going to be a skill that almost everyone's going to need in the future, depending on how jobs are impacted. Not every industry is going to be impacted at the same rate. Not every type of job is going to be impacted as well too. But these are just a few things that might happen.
Yeah, so just to add a little bit to what's needed, I think is one is just cultivating a love of learning, because it's clear that some jobs will disappear and other jobs will be created, and it is a dynamic world where things change quickly. But the one thing that stays the same is the need to kind of learn and adapt and find out new skills and find out how to best use your own talents. And so I think that is the single, perhaps, biggest thing that the education system can do to cultivate this love of learning. And the second important thing is to cultivate logical and critical thinking. And again, that is something that is, the need for that is not going to go away. There will be fake news, there will be a load of stuff being out there. And so training students to understand how to navigate that, and also just logical thinking is really at the heart of everything that we do, even to develop AI, right? Ultimately, it boils down to that. And so teaching those skills is going to be, I think, really important. I think, people are always afraid of change. People are afraid of disruption, yet humanity has evolved through a series of industrial revolutions, and it's always gotten better, right? Our lives have increased, and yes, we can complain about this and that, but generally, as a society, overall, if you look at the entire Earth, we are doing better, and there is no reason to think that something else will happen because of AI, at least not at the moment. I think we do have work to do to make sure that everybody is included in this revolution. But ultimately, I'm optimistic that things will be good.
I'm
Maybe
glad to
just
hear that.
one more point.
You want one more point?
Well,
Can you
on that-
do it quickly, because then we're going to go to questions.
Yeah, I just, just to quickly say, I think that, we shouldn't assume that it's going to be right around the corner. I mean, humans generally are very bad at predicting when technology is actually going to be adopted. For example, autonomous vehicles, the timeline for that has been pushed back, and according to certain people, instead of it being 5 years away, it's maybe closer to 20. So I think we shouldn't all freak out right now. It's going to be a longer transition period than we actually think. But yeah.
The climate people think we should probably freak out.
Yes.
Do you want to?
Yeah, well, I was just going to take chair's privilege and start to call the question.
Yeah.
So I hope you've all been inspired. Many of the themes that I think we've been thinking about in the conference have been amplified by our speakers here. It's clear that this notion of augmentation, change, rapid societal transformation, and the roles that we can play as educators in understanding that and communicating that and inculcating our students as well as our colleagues with that reality and contributing to it is very real, very present, even if some of the impacts seem far off. It's present and with us. So with that, let's thank our panelists first, and then we're going to go to questions for a great talk.
I do have.
Yeah. And so, and also just a word to all of you out in the remote satellites. Hi, we don't see you, but we feel your presence here. And we're looking forward to getting at least one or two contributions from you. So maybe let's start with a question in the audience here. One question. So Wolfgang and Marie's got a microphone, and then we're going to go to the remote.
So I find this all very interesting. Unfortunately, I have to go, so I'm going to go right after I ask my question. But when we say we believe in the positive, and the history of mankind has led through revolutions to a better world, the climate people might argue, our sustainability people might argue, not so fast, because what we've done to the planet might already have been to the point of no return. So the question is, are we reaching the AI point of no return when the machines rule over us? Once biometrics meets AI, it gets a little tricky. What do AI glasses measure in us, our where we look and how long we look? It does get tricky. So I just want a word of caution, and I don't know if you have a reaction to that. If we look at climate, is AI maybe at the point of no return already, or are we going to get there before we get our act together? Before we get our act together to legislate, like the discussion about Facebook, Google, the stocks dropped yesterday dramatically because this is in the air.
So just to answer that a little bit, so I think climate is actually on just about everybody's mind right now. And my answer as an AI researcher is we have a complicated problem. We do have data, lots of data. It is a complex system that is hard to analyze by classical means. Let's actually use AI to try and figure out if there are solutions and what kind of solutions we can hope for. And I think, a lot of the stuff that's been done in climate change has been essentially trying to convince people to change their behavior. And that seems to be a slow process. Maybe it'll get faster if people get more freaked out. But it's still fundamentally a slow process. But maybe there are technological solutions. It's just we don't see them because we don't understand everything well enough. And if we have AI tools, let's just use them for that.
And maybe a way to expose the general public to all the dangers like climate change and others can be through XR also, through being able to see actually the plastic ocean, to see the issues on Himalaya, to see what's going to be the planet if it continues to go wrong. So I agree, AI should help us actually to try to reverse the problematics on the climate change. After that, is AI on the road to control everyone in the world, etc.? It's up to us to, for sure, make good use of it. Like any technology, we have to make good use of it. Nuclear technology, we are trying to make a better use of it, so we'll have to do the same with AI. It's up to us, I think, to do that.
I mean, I think when we're talking about AI and control, it's less about a single AI with single intelligent AI coming to life, but much more about things like surveillance and tracking and those kind of controls, predictive controls that can actually push behavior run by governments, probably like ours, like China especially. I think that's where we're really going to run into problems much sooner, where programmatic AI tech is being used in the world already, and it's just going to spread. I think that's where the bigger dangers are, is human-controlled AI technology.
I mean, if it's a conversation around superintelligence, and I mean, it's going to be quite a while before we get to that point. You know, some researchers don't assume that it's going to happen until 2100, if at all. You know, we're not at a point where we have really good artificial general intelligence solutions right now that are robust, that can go across a wide variety of disciplines. So that may be the precursor, but we're not really there for the next little while.
How about something from SPAN? We have people out there who've been watching and listening, and we do thank you, and we welcome your input. We're probably not going to be able to answer a ton of questions because of time, but just to get, there's a bunch of them here about K-12 and classroom and AI. So an interesting one here on AI and content creation, and will that impact copyright? But then a whole bunch on how do we get kids to begin with AI? Is AI in the classroom? Are there any good examples of AI in the classroom right now? How can we think about getting students to learn by teaching an AI agent, you know, actually learning through engaging in AI creation? How can we speed up the adoption of AI in schools? It sounds like feeding the beast, but thoughts on that? That's
maybe one organization I can highlight is Kids Code Jeunesse, which recently made a big announcement to try and teach 1 million children the tool of artificial intelligence. And so, you know, they're not unique in that, but they're a fantastic organization really driving that mission. I think that there's really easy ways to explain the concepts around artificial intelligence. I think that what has happened in the past is usually it's going to be researchers with, you know, 15, 20 years of experience that are trying to teach someone that's maybe, you know, very new to the subject, and that disconnect can be a very difficult thing to overcome. But as better tools come out there, as people find better analogies to explain artificial intelligence, it's going to become easier and easier. And there's a lot of tools out there right now that just kind of give you a system, tell you to mess around with it a little bit and see how it changes your model. So it's starting to rise, and I hope that it continues to get adopted.
You're thinking of your next research program. That's interesting.
Are there any specific games or environments or platforms that you guys could recommend to the audience that you know about?
There's a lot of environments for teaching programming, but it's not the same as sort of real AI incorporated in the classroom. There's, I think, a lot less of that.
Seems like a great idea, somebody to build like a little tutorial kit and a
yeah, so I think Kids Code Jeunesse is working on some of the stuff for K-12.
I think there is various programs existing. Yesterday I presented that our own Little Rabbits coding to teach programming and maybe AI. I believe it should be also, we should try to make it fun, so to engage people from kids to adults on what is AI, and it's not necessarily going to destroy the world, but we can do great things with that, and we should be prepared and understand it better, actually, to be less afraid of it.
Our exhibit at the Canada Museum of Science and Tech in Ottawa next year is all about multiple AIs that can talk to kids about AI and show them what's under the hood.
That's neat. Do we have time for one more question?
Well, no, I think we're going to maybe one final comment, but I think we're going to have to wrap.
Yeah, the mic for a while, yeah.
Just very, very, very quickly. Just to follow up, though, there are coding in coding. So coding is actually progressively integrated in primary schools. Lots of robots and so on. At the iPad Summit, there was lots of examples. But my question, very quickly, is I'm concerned in terms of education, and specifically to AI. I'm a little bit reluctant, or from a critical standpoint, when companies get involved in AI, like the people who, you work for Ubisoft, there's certain private companies, when we start integrating these AI technologies in our classroom, there's a fine line between manipulation and education. And I think that fundamentally there needs to be more transparency as well as who's creating these AI technologies and for what purpose. It might be educational, and I totally agree with you, and it comes down to some of your comments, but it might also be sort of curtailed, the information, and a lot of it is left out. It's kind of like what Google does with their algorithms when you do searches. So that's basically my question, is that concern, private interests versus actual education?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that a little bit, given that I have two halves of my brain on each side. I think, in general, the AI and machine learning community has been extremely open in terms of circulating the ideas. And so unlike in other industries where there's patents and there's stuff that's sort of behind closed doors and you get the technology as a package, AI and machine learning as a field, including the companies, goes through an open publication model and an open software model. And so the way I think to allay the fears is to build things around the stuff that is out in the open that everybody has access to.
And I think maybe just to add to that, what Doina had mentioned earlier about critical thinking, I think it's going to be something that we continue to have to emphasize, that no matter what you're taught, critically challenge it. If it's coming from a single source, look at other sources that are out there. So I still think we have to continue to drive that message regardless of whether AI is being used or not, but maybe we'll have to do more of that in the future.
So with that, I think we can all give a round of applause to our panelists for inspiring us and getting us to think. We could go on. We could go on. Just to say a couple of quick words. There's one theme that seemed to emerge here. It's not just about the technology; it's about the human interventions too. And as teachers, as educators, as researchers, we spend a lot of time thinking about where to place these interventions for maximum impact. It scales. It's not just education; it's everywhere. It's been demonstrated by our panelists. So thank you for coming to this panel. Thank you for coming to SALTISE.